Welcome to Power and Politics. I'm David Common. Green Party leader Annamie Paul is fighting back after an attempt to oust her.
A group of councillors sought to force a vote of non-confidence in my leadership. They did so with no substantive consultation with the members they represent. They produced a list of allegations that were so racist, so sexist, that they were immediately disavowed by both of our MPs as offensive and inflammatory and contrary to party ethics, and I thank our MPs for that.
Paul also took a big swing at the Prime Minister after he wooed Green MP Jenica Atwin over to the Liberal side.
To the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, I say to you today, you are no ally and you are no feminist. To the people of Canada, I ask you directly, how many times will we allow Justin Trudeau to get away with pushing strong, competent, capable women out of politics when they are seeking to serve?
Well, that gives us a lot to talk about. Will Annamie Paul end the questions about her leadership? Let's get into it with the power panel here. Sherelle Evelyn, Amanda Alvaro, Tim Powers, and Kathleen Monk. Boy, oh boy, much more to go on. Kathleen, let me start with you because it is that first clip that we played in which Annamie Paul is explaining some of these explosive allegations leveled against her. Let me just read some of them in this leaked allegation of non-confidence, an autocratic attitude of hostility, superiority, and rejection. Relationship with caucus is hostile and dismissive. They say she has damaged the interests of the Green Party. They go on to say that she has failed to intervene, failed to refute her advisors' what turned out to be controversial words to the media or to party members. Annamie Paul explaining at least some of that by attacking those within her party as racist and sexist. It's stunning, but where do things land? Kathleen, I'll throw it to you first.
Well, I think that Ms. Paul has a point to make, and it's a good one around political gatekeepers, and that when unique new leadership like Paul come to the fore, that change is often hard, and there's a lot that she has had to try to do to kind of forge her path, and also to ensure that those who come behind her are also lifted up, and she's clearing that path for them. So I agree. I support her in those comments that I think that it's not always easy, and political gatekeepers have for years, closed off the gates to lots of different equity-seeking candidates, and so I don't think that's surprising, and I take her at her word that struggle has been really quite difficult within the Green Party. But I guess I would point to, I as a pundit, as a political strategist, I want to just talk more so about what I'm seeing and the lessons that can be learned here. And I said earlier on Twitter that every political staffer, anyone who ever wants to run for political office, should be watching what's happening in the Green Party right now, because there are so many lessons to be learned. As pundits, we like to say things, oh, the wheels are off the bus, that party's eating their own. This situation is putting all of those cliches to shame. It is, as I said earlier, it is a bit of a flamethrower. The problem is that the Green Party has not done a few things correctly. One, issue management around the issues around the Middle East, and understanding and working around those issues, talking to other and outside stakeholders and their own members. They haven't done caucus membership well. And I point to one example that I lived and breathed, which was with Jack Layton. When he got elected leader, he put his fiercest leadership rival, Bill Blakey, in the role of House Leader, and amended those rifts and worked together collectively. I'm not sure if the same could be said in the Green Party. There was this two-headed leadership happening with Elizabeth May in the House and Annamie Paul on the outside, and I think that really created a rift. And I don't think that all members of the Green Party were willing to accept the change in the Green Party leadership with Annamie Paul at the top, and that is where the challenges and some of the problems started to fester.
Sherelle, I want to get your thoughts on where all of this comes from.
Oh, gosh, where do we begin?
You've got 9 hours.
This is Yeah, this is a party that has this is a party that has had internal turmoil and strife that predates Annamie Paul's leadership. This is a party where they had disagreements over how to handle the hiring and then the ultimate short-lived employment and resignation of their most recent executive director. This is a party whose last leader was being investigated for harassment, which was the claims were ultimately found to have been without merit by a party investigation. This is not a party that has had a very strong, stable internal history, and it's unfortunate that Annamie Paul does not have the opportunity to establish herself. There's something that people who look like her and I know very well. It's like you have to be twice as good to get half as far. And she has been in this role for a handful of months, and the knives were out from the beginning. A lot of what we're seeing is coming from people who were, in opposing camps in the leadership race. So these are all things that have been bubbling up for months, if not years, and it has now fallen to her to fix it when she wasn't necessarily the one who fully created the issue, but now she's at the head of the snake, and they're looking to cut it off.
Yeah, certainly the Green Party has issues that have now come out to the fore for everybody to see. But as she was speaking to us, I did think a bit about Barack Obama, perhaps the most high-profile black politician of the Western world of all time. Not of all time, but of our more recent time. And thinking, as you talk, Sherelle, about he always said there was always the double standard, regardless of what he did. Anyway, it's just sort of reminded me of it as you talk about it again. Tim, where do things go from here? Clearly, this story continues to be written.
You've given me a line, though, David, I have to use, and I mean no disrespect to Annamie Paul with this when I say it, but I'm thinking of Lloyd Benson and Dan Quayle when he said, "Sir, you are no John F. Kennedy," and I don't think Annamie Paul yet had become a Barack Obama. So let's put that in context. I don't dispute she's had to deal with the things that she's had to deal with. No doubt she has. I admired her courage in pushing back today. Though I would say if we look at it through a traditional lens, usually when you're pushing back and you're attacking the leader of the other party who's just taken one of your MPs, that's a pretty standard tactic and should be called out for being that. Jenica Atwin made a decision herself. You shouldn't take away Jenica Atwin's choice in making that particular move. And I think the other challenge we have, David, looking at all of this is we're trying to look at the Green Party as if it is has the structural bona fides as the NDP and the Liberals and the Conservatives do. I think if we've learned anything about the Green Party, it's more a coalition of movements. So this may be more normal for them, but the challenge they have is they're going to an electorate very soon that is used to more parties with more structure, more predictable behavior. And this has got disaster written all over it for them. There was could be lots to be excited about around Annamie Paul and all that she represents. But again, the symbolism, and this is what killed Stockwell Day, of your own party not wanting you is just so hard to overcome for the average Canadian voter. If their party doesn't want them, why do I want this person, no matter how appealing that individual may be? Maybe the last thing I'd say, David, is the Greens in Canada seem to have success when they're in certain regions and closer together. Look at PEI. They've built some good momentum there. New Brunswick as well, even BC. I don't know if there's some disconnect between the federal level and the provincial levels that Annamie Paul can call upon to add authenticity to the party as they go for votes in the next election.
Amanda, along the way in this relatively short news conference, one of the things that Annamie Paul did in terms of coming out swinging was call the Prime Minister, "You are not an ally and not a feminist." Does that land with voters?
I I don't think so, because I think people can see through that particular argument, that particular swing. It's pretty anti-feminist to suggest that Jenica Atwin didn't have a mind of her own. So I think that one falls on deaf ears. But there's no doubt that she was taking swings. I mean, again, this was explosive. This was anyone who expected her to be coming to the mic today with some kind of apologetic tone, some kind of reconciliatory tone in order to make amends, or in order to have some diplomacy amongst her party and how they're going to move forward, were like disappointed, because this was the opposite of that, right? She threw everything in the book at this one. The allegations were racist, they were sexist, they were inflammatory, they were offensive, they were against the ethics of the party. So the question is, where does she go from here? We know the ultimatum was issued. She's required to denounce this political aid. She's required to talk about her unwavering support to her MPs. It's probably why she left the press conference saying, I support them, I support them, I support them 3 times. But where does she go from here? Is she prepared to make amends, to find some diplomacy within the party in order to have a united front to put in front of Canadians? Feels like today, not so much. Feels like she's really just in it for the fight.
All right, let us all exhale with a brief break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Canada's inflation rate. It's really heating up as we come out of this pandemic. The Power Panel on what the government should do, if anything, to cool rising prices. That's up next.
I say again that the Prime Minister is not a feminist. He is not an ally. To undermine my leadership at this early stage in such a willful, craven way, that is not the kind of politics that people in Canada should want to see. They should want to see me in Parliament meeting him on the battlefield of ideas. I'm asking again the Prime Minister to back off, and I'm telling him again that he has reaped what he has sown, and I want to know if he's happy.
Okay, Green Party leader Annamie Paul defending her leadership again today, again calling out the Prime Minister, blaming him and the Liberals for the recent turmoil existing within her own party. Where does her leadership stand after this week? Can she unite her party moving forward? It's Thursday. I'm here with At Issue, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. Good to see everybody. Let's start, Althea, with you, and on that point that Annamie Paul has made now for a couple of days, that this has something to do with the Prime Minister and that he is somehow responsible for what is happening here.
Yeah, I think let's be clear, this has absolutely nothing to do with Justin Trudeau. Annamie Paul is like drowning and trying to grab at anything that she can to diffuse blame. This is a problem, it seems, of her own making. And if there's any blame to go around, it should go around in her own party. It is completely natural for a party leader to want to try to poach MPs from other parties. We've seen that continuously. Even Elizabeth May did that. Yep. And so to have Annamie Paul stand there and say that this is somehow like Jane Philpott and Jody Wilson-Raybould is outrageous, frankly, and pretty rich.
Andrew, your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, Justin Trudeau may be, as Ms. Paul charges, a fake feminist, but I'm not sure working to undermine opposition parties is evidence of that. That is the stuff, unfortunately, you might say. Maybe we should have a higher-minded view of politics than that, but it's pretty standard fare for political leaders to try to divide their opposition forces, to try to lure other party MPs to cross to their ranks. That is, pretty standard stuff of politics. So she does seem to be trying to kind of raise the stakes, if you will, on this beyond the specifics of this particular issue.
Chantal.
Well, if you're a feminist, I guess you wouldn't want to be suggesting that a female MP, Jenica Atwin, not to name her, that decides to change parties has no will of her own and is being hypnotized by a male prime minister. That doesn't sound terribly feminist to me to start with. Second, the moving on in other comments to Chrystia Freeland being just some person that a token person for the prime minister. It's not very feminist to go after accomplished women in other parties. It sounds to me like Madame Paul is either not getting any real advice or not listening to it.
Okay, so what is going on here beside the the issue of trying to blame someone else for the problems? How much is this hurting Annamie Paul's leadership, Althea?
It's hurting her leadership, and frankly, it's hurting the party. She says that she had a strong mandate, but the party was split. I mean, she basically she won on the 8th ballot with the 2,000 votes between her and the other candidate who represents a more militant part of the Green Party. And so already she kind of had a mountain to climb, but she was the favorite candidate of people like Elizabeth May. The bigger problem, I think, is that even those in her caucus don't see eye to eye with her on this Janica Atwin thing. They want her to love her back, to welcome her with open arms, and basically to apologize. And Ms. Paul is digging her heels in and refusing to say, even if she agrees with the content of what her assistant said, just say that it was inappropriate for him to basically threaten sitting MPs. And she's still, she's had 2 press conferences so far this week, and still she refuses to say that that was an inappropriate comment from her aide. So I think until she does that, her problems will not go away.
And Andrew, is this about it is difficult to lead the Green Party because the Green Party is not sort of what you might call traditionally dealt with the way other parties are, or is this about Annamie Paul's ability to lead the party?
I think there's fault on all sides. The party itself has a large faction within it that has, if I may say, wildly intemperate views on the Middle Eastern conflict, which they're entitled to, but it's guaranteed to create ill feeling and division within the party. Sure. That was compounded by Ms. Paul's advisor then basically publicly threatening to unseat the MPs who had voiced these expressions, and it sort of metastasized from there. On top of that, there's issues around Ms. Paul's style of leadership. Now, she has accused her critics of mouthing sort of racist and sexist tropes of, quote unquote, the angry black woman. And that's a fair charge, or can be. But what do you do if you have an individual in question who happens to be high-handed and autocratic, but is also a black woman? Do you just desist from making any criticism? Do you just back off and say any criticism is in and of itself evidence of racism, sexism? That's an open question. I think that's something the party is going to have to really wrestle with.
Yeah, Chantal?
Any chief of staff to any leader that would put in writing threats against sitting MPs, and even more so for a party that has worked really hard to work itself up to 3 seats, would have been in another party fired. And because that is totally displaced. Staffers do not threaten elected MPs with campaigning against them. Yes. How can that make any sense in any event? Yeah. Are you trying to clean up your caucus so you end up with 0 in the House of Commons? Because that is where this leads. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that there are many people who have been interested in the Green Party because of Elizabeth May and her rather positive approach to politics, right, and cooperative approach to politics. Those people are not interested in getting into an internal war over the Middle East within the membership of the Green Party, or watching the leaders settle scores. So what doesn't seem to be clear to Madame Paul at this point is that people can just stay home, or they can vote for other parties, but they don't whore their vote. And at this point, the messages she is sending is a turnoff for both her leadership and her party.
So how much of this is to do with the fact that Elizabeth May led this party for 13 years, I think, and when you lose a leader after that period of time, especially when the leader sticks around, just decided not to do the job anymore, that it is hard for parties to become something else, independent of what the leader was. We saw that a little bit, I think, with the Conservatives as Andrew Scheer tried to take over Stephen Harper's party. Althea, do you think that part of that is the challenge here?
Well, 2 things. I think, back to her accusations that the party, that some of the councillors were displaying sexist and racist behavior towards her. And the challenge is that she says that she was being held to a different set of standard than the previous leader, Elizabeth May. Right. Regardless of what identities the next leader had, they were always going to be held to a different standard than Elizabeth May. Elizabeth May basically embodied the Green Party. The Green Party was Elizabeth May, and she had a lot of leeway for a party leader that was never going to exist in the new leader. Has Elizabeth May's presence in the House made Annamie Paul's life more difficult? Yes, perhaps. Elizabeth May could have given her seat to Annamie Paul, and Annamie Paul would have had an easier time in the House of Commons. She would have been a presence in the House of Commons, and she wouldn't have been living under Elizabeth May's shadow. Yeah. Elizabeth May still in the House means that there is constantly that compare and contrast between the two leaders, and Ms. Paul is judged according to the Elizabeth May barometer for many Green Party members.
Andrew?
Ms. May was, let us recall, also subject to a formal inquiry on charges of bullying and harassment of her staffers. This is not an unknown charge against any leader. It's particularly not unknown within the Green Party, which has a particularly takes a dim view of high-handedness from the top. So that's, that should be laid on the table as well. But yeah, the party was very much subsumed in Ms. May's personality. She was a force to be reckoned with. She was well known in the media, and it became almost cult-like, I would say. I think she, like you mentioned, Stephen Harper, I think you can be faulted for not preparing the ground for your succession, for not creating a lively leadership race to follow with strong contenders, so that you create the sense that the party is more than just the individual who leads it. And I don't think she has succeeded very well on that ground.
Chantal.
If I can just say, though, that Elizabeth May was not all of the Green Party. This is a party that has made significant inroads in Atlantic Canada at the provincial level. And that is why that defection really hurts the federal party, because it does have credible people in the legislature, in PEI, in New Brunswick. And to have the only federal MP that is elected outside of Elizabeth May's sphere of influence defect to the Liberals sends a pretty powerful message that federally the party is not as serious as some of its provincial wings. And having said, and I agree with everything that's been said about Elizabeth May's strong presence, but the Green Party's results in Atlantic Canada were not just Elizabeth May, they were also Greens in that region that in many ways are looking at this and thinking, I don't want to be in the mess that these people are in. It's a bit like the Reform, the Canadian Alliance, the Tories federally fighting, and provincial wings of the Progressive Conservative Party not wanting to be stuck in that environment.